It disturbed me that he was there before I was, and then thinking about how did it work out for me that he had just done this, yes.
Susan Dey was just a teenager when she got the part of Laurie Partridge on the Partridge Family. She was suddenly famous alongside David Cassidy, who was already becoming the biggest teen heartthrob in the world. Girls everywhere had his posters on their bedroom walls, but what nobody knew was that Susan was falling for him, too. Behind her sweet smile and perfect acting, Susan was living a completely different story. Every day on set, every lunch break, every moment they spent together made her feelings stronger. To her, David wasn't just another teen idol. He was someone she felt close to, someone she thought could be much more than a co-star. But David never saw it that way. To him, Susan was like family, like a sister. This was the worst possible thing for a young girl who was head over heels in love. Think about what that must have been like. Susan had to be around the person she loved most every single day, but she knew he would never feel the same way. For years, she kept this secret. She never let it show on camera, never let the magazines find out. While David was getting fan mail from millions of girls and flirting with guest stars, Susan played the role of the sweet, unbothered co-star. But inside, she was falling apart. Even David later admitted he could tell Susan had feelings for him, but he ignored it at the time. Maybe he didn't want to mess up their working relationship, or maybe he was too busy enjoying being the world's most wanted teen star. For Susan, though, being ignored hurt deeply. She couldn't shake the feeling that her emotions were real and important, even if David didn't see them that way. Susan chose to stay quiet to protect herself from embarrassment and to protect David's career. The show was built on the idea of a perfect, wholesome family, not scandal. A messy romance behind the scenes could have ruined everything. But as her feelings out stronger, something else was happening to Susan. The pressure of fame, unwanted attention, and years of heartbreak were destroying her from the inside. While the world saw Susan as a shining star, she was secretly fighting a battle that almost broke her. On screen, she looked perfect, the ideal teenager that every young girl wanted to be. But when the cameras stopped rolling, she was struggling with terrible insecurities that ate away at her. The pressure of fame hit Susan hard and fast. She wasn't an experienced actress when the Partridge Family started. She was still practically a child. Suddenly, millions of people were watching her. Every magazine cover and fan letter reminded her that she had to look perfect, thin, and flawless all the time. This kind of attention wasn't just overwhelming, it was suffocating. As the years went by, Susan developed a dangerous cycle. She got severe anorexia, which became the darkest part of her life. It wasn't just about looking good. It was about having control. In a world where she couldn't control her fame, her image, or her feelings for David, she turned to the one thing she could control: food, or more specifically, not eating. Even her castmates noticed she was getting thinner and thinner, but nobody said anything. Back then, people didn't talk about mental health and eating disorders the way we do today. For Susan, this silence made everything worse. She felt alone and trapped in a body she didn't trust anymore. The cruelest part was that while Susan was falling apart inside, David was becoming more successful than ever. He was loved by fans worldwide, selling out concerts and living every young star's dream. And there was Susan, standing right next to him, secretly breaking down. Imagine being madly in love with someone while also convincing yourself you're not good enough to ever be loved back. That's the nightmare Susan lived through every day. Her crush on David wasn't just some silly teenage fantasy. It became mixed up with her feelings of not being worth anything. Every smile he gave to screaming fans, every rumor about a new girlfriend, every time he overlooked her feelings, it all made her hurt more and more inside. She got thinner, but the pain in her heart got heavier. Still, she stayed professional. She didn't let the tabloids see her suffering. She didn't let David know how much he meant to her or how much his indifference was hurting her. But deep down, she couldn't hold it in forever. The day would come when Susan's silence would finally break, when she would tell David everything she had been keeping inside for years. For years, Susan lived in quiet pain, acting as Laurie Partridge during the day while secretly wanting something more with David Cassidy. But eventually, keeping quiet became impossible. The weight of her hidden feelings, combined with all her other struggles, pushed her to a breaking point. When it finally happened, it wasn't on set or during an interview. It was private, at David's house. One night, Susan let everything out. No more hiding. No more pretending to be just a co-star or the sister figure David saw her as. She told him exactly how she felt. In what became a legendary moment between them, Susan confessed her love in a conversation that reportedly lasted 3 hours. Imagine holding back every thought, every pain, every unspoken word for years, and then releasing it all at once. That's exactly what Susan did. She told David she was in love with him. For once, she let him see how vulnerable she really was, the feelings she had been protecting so carefully. This wasn't just a casual crush anymore. This was everything she had kept bottled up since their teenage years on the Partridge Family, pouring out all at once. David didn't know how to respond. To the outside world, he was confident and charming, someone who could win over anyone with a smile. But here, faced with Susan's complete honesty, he froze. He later admitted that he cared for her deeply, and that he had always known she had feelings for him. But he couldn't bring himself to see her as anything more than what she had always been to him, family. It was heartbreaking. Susan had finally found the courage to tell him everything, and the one person she wanted most didn't feel the same way. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Even though David didn't initially see her romantically, something about Susan's confession stayed with him. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was guilt, or maybe he realized he had been overlooking someone who had always been right there beside him. Whatever it was, it led to a moment that would forever change everything between them. Not long after Susan's 3-hour confession, something inevitable happened. They spent the night together, but instead of leading to love, that night left Susan feeling humiliated and David saying shocking things about her that would haunt their relationship forever. After years of tension and unspoken feelings, it finally happened. Susan Dey and David Cassidy crossed the line from friends and co-stars into something more intimate. For Susan, it was everything she had dreamed about since the early days of the Partridge Family. But reality was nothing like the fantasy she had built up in her mind. The two ended up spending the night together, something fans would never have guessed during the show's wholesome run. But instead of being the start of a beautiful love story, it quickly became one of the most awkward and painful chapters in their relationship. David later admitted the spark simply wasn't there. He said the chemistry that millions of fans saw on screen didn't work when the cameras were off and reality set in. For Susan, this was crushing. She had built up years of passion and hope, only to discover that the man she adored didn't feel it the same way. What made it even worse were David's brutally honest comments afterward. In his memoir, he confessed that the night with Susan left him disappointed. He wrote that she wasn't dirty enough for him, a cruel and cutting remark that turned what had been a heartfelt confession on Susan's part into a story of rejection and humiliation. Those words stung not just because of what they meant about that one night, but because they showed how differently the two had viewed their entire relationship. For Susan, it was a vulnerable leap of faith, the most important moment of her life. For David, it was little more than curiosity, an experiment, something to shrug off when it didn't work out. The difference in how they felt was staggering, and it created a wound between them that never really healed. In Hollywood, stories of co-stars getting together are common. But what made this one so haunting was the emotional weight Susan had placed on it. This wasn't just another fling for her. It was everything she had wanted and feared at the same time. To have it dismissed so bluntly, and even mocked later in print, was devastating. The consequences went far beyond embarrassment. This failed attempt at romance didn't just hurt Susan's feelings, it began to destroy the foundation of their friendship. After all, how do you go back to being just friends when the one moment you finally connect is described as a disappointment? From then on, things were never the same between them. There was an invisible wall, a tension that only grew heavier with time. Time passed, and the Partridge family's popularity faded. David Cassidy's teen idol status slowly dimmed, and Susan Dey stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight. But their complicated story was far from over. Years later, in 1994, David shocked readers with his memoir, Come On, Get Happy, Fear and Loathing on the Partridge Family Bus. In it, he pulled back the curtain on what really happened between him and Susan. He admitted they had slept together, but he also dismissed it in the crew. Lest way possible, saying Susan wasn't dirty enough for him. That one line wasn't just a careless remark. It was a dagger. It turned their private moment into public entertainment, and Susan never forgave him for it. Hidden between the harsh words, there was also a trace of regret. David confessed that he always loved Susan, just not in the way she wanted. He called it a special kind of love, the kind you feel for someone who means more than just a co-star, but not quite enough to risk everything for. It was a confusing half-truth that sounded more like guilt than real affection. For Susan, it wasn't enough. The fallout was brutal. Susan felt betrayed not only by the memoir itself, but by David's decision to turn her most vulnerable moment into a story for the masses. That betrayal cemented her silence. She cut ties completely, refusing to attend Partridge Family reunions, refusing to comment in interviews, and refusing to ever speak to David again. The irony was painful. Fans begged for reunions, but Susan's absence was the loudest statement of all. Despite his honesty in the memoir, David later admitted he regretted how he handled everything. He knew his words had hurt her, and he even expressed sorrow that their relationship ended in silence instead of friendship. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done, and Susan had made her choice: complete distance. For decades, their once close friendship became nothing more than a ghost of what might have been. The world remembered them as Laurie and Keith Partridge, but behind the scenes, they were two people forever divided by one night and one book. After David Cassidy's memoir exposed their private history to the world, Susan Dey made a choice that stunned fans. She vanished from the narrative completely. No interviews about David, no cast reunions, no nostalgic stories for talk shows. She turned her back on the Partridge Family legacy, at least when it came to revisiting it with her former castmates. That silence became louder than any words she could have spoken. People wondered endlessly about her reasons. Was it anger? Was it heartbreak? Or was it the humiliation of seeing her most vulnerable moment reduced to a cruel punchline in print? The truth is, it was all of that and more. Susan had already endured years of inner battles: her struggles with anorexia, the relentless scrutiny of fame, and her unrequited love for David Cassidy. His memoir felt like the final betrayal. But there's another piece to her silence that few people know. After the Partridge Family, Susan sought peace and healing through support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. She wanted to step away from the industry machine and find real human connection outside of cameras and lights. But even there, she wasn't safe. According to rumors, a tabloid infiltrated her AA group, leaking details that were meant to remain confidential. That violation of trust only reinforced her decision to shut out the public completely. So she didn't speak. Susan refused cast reunions even when the rest of the Partridge Family came together. Fans noticed her absence every single time, and her silence only created more questions. But she stayed consistent. She would not give David Cassidy or the media the satisfaction of another word. To her, silence was the only way to reclaim power over a story that had been taken from her. Maybe that's what makes her silence so haunting. It wasn't passive, it was deliberate. Each no to an interview, each skipped reunion, each refusal to comment was her way of reminding the world that some wounds don't heal just because time passes. Today, Susan Dey is 72 years old, and the mystery surrounding her silence is as powerful as ever. For decades, she has remained one of Hollywood's most mysterious figures, almost like a ghost of her own fame. While other cast members from the Partridge Family embraced nostalgia, Susan walked away completely. After David Cassidy passed away in 2017, many wondered if Susan would finally break her silence. Fans expected a heartfelt statement, some kind of closure, maybe even a confession of the complicated love that connected them. But instead there was nothing, not a word. That absence spoke volumes. Now, whispers suggest that Susan may finally be ready to share her truth. At 72, she has little to lose and everything to gain by reclaiming her story. Imagine the weight of carrying a secret for over 50 years, through the highs of fame, struggles with health, and the sting of betrayal. To release that now could be both healing and explosive. Insiders claim she has been approached multiple times with offers to write her own memoir, each one promising to give her the platform David once stole from her. If she ever accepts, it won't just be another celebrity book. It would be the final piece of a puzzle that has fascinated fans for decades. The truth is, nobody knows if Susan will ever fully open up. But one thing is certain. At 72, time is running out. If she decides to finally reveal what really happened between her and David Cassidy, it will be one of the most shocking Hollywood revelations of all time. And fans who grew up loving the Partridges will finally see the dark, unpolished truth behind the perfect family facade. After half a century of silence, one question remains. When Susan Dey finally speaks, will it be a story of forgiveness or a revelation that changes everything we thought we knew about her and David Cassidy forever?